Hello, friends. Today, let us talk about a novella by Fyodor Dostoevsky. The name of the novella is An Honest Thief. We have this short novella in the syllabus of the University of Kerala, part of second semester. In this particular novella, Dostoevsky presents a character called Emilian Ilyich, who is a thief, but an honest thief. When we talk about an honest thief, usually we are reminded of the parable of good thief in the story of Jesus' passion narratives. Two thieves were crucified along with Jesus. The man on the right side became repentant of his sins and he implores Jesus to save him into paradise. Dostoevsky presents his character, this honest thief, Emilian Ilyich, after the model of the good thief in the Gospel of Luke. Here, the story has, in a way, we can say, a story within the story. And technically, it is called a core narrative and a frame narrative. Core narrative is the opening story. That story is about an unnamed narrator and his chat or conversation with his housemaid Agrafena. Usually, this unnamed narrator he represents the bureaucratic society, the rich aristocratic community in Russia. They live indifferently to others. They have no contact with the external world. They have got money and they live in their ivory palace. Such a man is this unnamed narrator. And the other two characters, they are given names. Whereas this unnamed character, the so called hero in the story, the main character in the story, he doesn't have a name, and that is deliberate because Dostoevsky wants to present this unnamed character as a symbol for all those who live indifferently towards the poor people in the society who live in their ivory palace in Russia. Dostoevsky was a socialist by his choice or option. And when we check or when we explore his biography, we know that he joined with the socialist revolutionaries and he had to suffer imprisonment for a long time and all. He became a very famous novelist after his imprisonment. And we have the famous novels like Crime and Punishment, Brothers Karamazov, The Idiot. So we know that he is a world famous novelist, and some of his novels have become classics indeed. He has also written half a dozen novella, like An Honest Thief. You have The Poor Folk, The Double, so on and so forth. We can also find similar elements in An Honest Thief and also in Poor Folk. In a way, this particular character, Emilian Ilyich, actually he figures in the Poor Folk also. There in that novel, Emilian is a government clerk. He has good standing in society. He has got money, a salaried man. But because of his addiction to drinking, alcoholism, he spoils everything. He is a crumbled, a haggard, a desperate man. He loses his job. He becomes poverty stricken. Very miserable picture we have in the poor folk. And there the character is Emilian. In An Honest Thief, we can in a way say that this is a sequel, a continuation of the miserable life of this Emilian. There he was a government clerk who loses his job. Here he is totally a beggar. He doesn't have anything because he spoiled everything in drinking. A total addict to alcoholism, and we see the poor plight of this man in this story, an honest thief. When the story begins, we have this unnamed narrator talking with his housemaid Agrafena. They have never talked for 6 years. She never talked to her boss. But today, on a particular day, she comes, intervenes, and she asks this narrator whether he would be willing to rent out a part of his apartment to a man, a lodger who is seeking an accommodation. And the lodger, or the would-be lodger, is Astafi Ivanovich. He is a retired soldier, a military man. Formerly he was a tailor, and now he wants to find some place for his accommodation. And because of this Agrafena's insistence, the narrator somehow accepts her request, and Astafi is offered lodging in his apartment. And one day, as they were talking, what happens is a stranger creeps in, and it is winter season. This stranger gets into their apartment, and he takes, or he steals a rider's suit that is kept there, and he runs off. He's this narrator. The owner of the house is a rich man, and the dress that is an overcoat. It's not a rider's suit. Rider's suit will come in the story of Astaf Ivanovich. In fact, it is an overcoat of this unnamed narrator, and he runs off. He flees off. In fact, Astafi wants to catch him. He's a military man. So he runs after him, chases him. But he could not catch hold of this guy, and he escapes with that rich, very luxurious overcoat. And this is winter season, and the man must be very a poor, wretched, or a creature, a miserable creature, because he wants something to clad on because of the winter season. And in Russia, winter means this is chilly. That's why. And after this incident, this unfortunate incident, Aistafi becomes ferocious, and narrator seems to be indifferent, though he lost his court. And Astafi, becomes very ferocious, and he lashes out at narrator about the laws. And during their chat, their pleasantries, Astafi is reminded of another thief. It is here, Asafi begins narrating the story about this Emilian Ilyich. So, till then, you have the core narrative. That is how, this is a dual layered or a double layered narration, a particular type of narrative technique that Dostoevsky is employing here. And after this core narrative, Astafi takes over the story, and from his bio, Astafi narrates this particular meeting with this man called Emilian Ilyich. Astafi was staying elsewhere, and he was a tailor, working as a tailor. And another rich man has entrusted him with a very good stuff, very, very, very expensive stuff, to make a rider's suit, and it is there. And Astafi, it is a rider's suit, and it is kept with Astafi Ivanovich by an unnamed, an unknown rich man. The thing is, this rich man never came back asking for this rider's suit. So Astafi was keeping it along with him for a long time, and he also even plans to sell it off because Astafi thought that this would fetch a good amount to him. That is how he was pondering over it. And Emilian, he happens to meet Emilian in a bar. So as he was drinking, he finds this a man, a beggar. He was watching him, and as if with his body language, he was begging for a drink. And Astafi, a good-natured man, he invites him to sit with him on the table, and he offers him drink. And they had their drink there in the bar, and as Astafi was taking leave for his house, for his apartment, Emilian joins him just like a dog. In fact, Dostoevsky uses this expression. He is following like a dog because Emilian has nowhere to lay his head. He's a total beggar. So he wants to find a place, a shelter, and he finds that this Astaf is a good man, and so he follows him. And Emilian doesn't reject him. He goes and Astafi gives him shelter along with him, and Emilian stays with him. Emilian, Astafi finds, is a good man. Only thing is, he's addicted to drinks. Otherwise, he seems to be a very nice man. Always he's silent and he doesn't talk much. And, the days passed by. And one fine morning, what happens is, Astafi is in custody. He's a custodian of that rider's suit, as I said. And one fine morning, it is found missing. This is how, and Astafi becomes very much confounded because it's not his. It was given to him by a customer, a client, and he can turn up at any moment for the dress. That is why Astaf is confounded and he searches everywhere and he doesn't know who took it. And in the story, we can find that there are three poor people, poor men in a way, we can say. That is the first thief who came over to this unnamed narrator's apartment. He must be a very poor man. It is winter season and he doesn't have anything to dress him up, and that is why he took off that overcoat. And Astaf is also a poor man because he is a lodger. He stays in somebody else's house because he doesn't own a house. And the third one is Emilian Ilyich, the man, under question or under discussion now. Emilian was asked by Astafia whether he took this dress, and he said, "No, I didn't take the dress," he said. And he keeps quiet. So Astafia believes him. And the days passed on, and he could not, for Astafia could not recover this very expensive rider's suit. And it goes on. And after this incident of this interrogation, what happens? We find that Emilian is found missing. He doesn't come back to Astafi's apartment for a while. And Astafi is also very much, confused or worried about him because he knows that Emilian doesn't have any place. So he waits for 2, 3 days and he searches for him everywhere and they could not find him. He took that rider's suit, in fact, and he sold it off elsewhere. He took the money and he was spending that money in the bar. That's why he didn't come back. And after 3, 4 days, one fine morning, as Astafi was getting up, he found Emilian sleeping like a dog in front of his door. And Astafi is very sympathetic towards this guy, and he takes him, welcomes, even though Astafi knows that he had a slight doubt about him stealing that rider's suit. He doesn't show anything. He welcomes him back to his apartment and he comes back and he sits there. By this time, what happens is Emilian is totally sick and must be cirrhosis, the problems with the liver and all for a drunk for an addict or alcoholic. That's what happens, and he's totally sick and he's at the point of death. That is why he came back. He cannot even sit. He can sit straight. He cannot stand up on his leg. He's totally sick at the tip of death. That is how he is back. And it is this scene, we find the real core of his person, the real gem of his person. He came back to Astafi to make his last confession. And he weeps, tears roll down from his eyes, and he makes his confession to Astafi because he knows that Astafi loves him very much. That is why a stranger like him, but he was welcomed by this man, a military man, a very stout, very strong man, and he accommodated him for a while. And even then, the nature, the real nature of Emilian for kleptomania. Kleptomania means that the tendency to steal wherever he goes. Because and here what happens is he is impelled by his nature because of his instinct for drinking. And this kleptomaniac type of man he is, and Emilian, he realizes very much that he is going to die. There is no salvation for him. So he wants to make his confession, and at his deathbed, on his deathbed, he makes the confession that he stole the rider's suit from him. And he said, "I am ready to repair for my sin, and he has nothing else but the only worn out that rag cloth that he was wearing. It is torn off everywhere. It is an old rag cloth, and he says, you can take this cloth as a compensation, or this is the only thing that I can give you to compensate what I have done. You take it, and I would die totally naked as I go back to earth." This is his last confession. And with these words, actually, Astafi feels that he is really the good thief, because if usually the thieves, they may not have that remorse, that reparation, that sense of reparation for sins. But Emilian, at the last moment, as he realizes his sins, he confesses it to the owner, and he says, this is the only humble way in which I can repair for the sins that I have committed. And he dies, or he uh, uh, you know dies in peace in front of Astafi. Astafi forgives him, and he dies in peace. So it's at this point, Dostoevsky makes that comparison between the good thief in the Gospel of Luke and Emilian Ilyich in this story. We can find so many social elements in this. Though Dostoevsky is a socialist man, and he was a revolutionary, we can think, or we can say, Emilian is not of a Marxian type of character, but he is of a Dickensian type of character, poor man. That is how the critics do make comments about this particular character in this short novella. During 19th century, that I think this novella was written back in 1848. So at that time, the Russia was under the grip of poverty, and we can get the clear, direct images or pictures of the poverty-stricken society of Russia through Dostoevsky's novellas. So in this story, in this An Honest Thief, also we can get that picture. The story has got connection with his other novels, for example, like The Poor Folk, Prohatchin, The Double. In many other stories also we can find a similar strains or similar strands, running through in other stories also. And usually, the main theme, the main preoccupation of Dostoevsky, we know that it is with the guilt feeling, the sin, the guilt feeling, reparation for sins. So this is how he has designed his novels. For example, his most famous novel, Crime and Punishment, that talks about the real remorse of that villain turned into a good man, Raskolnikov. He goes to a pawnbroker, and he kills a widow, and finally he is taken up, or he is eaten up by his remorse for sin that he committed. And he listens to the gospel passage on Lazarus resuscitation, and he finally decides to pay for his sin. So this is how that story of Crime and Punishment goes. So we can find the similar pattern, the same strand, running through many of his novels and also in his novellas. From the point of view of this exam, I think you may be asked about the character sketch of this Emilian Ilyich, sometimes about the social situation as depicted in this short novella. You may also be asked a question about Astaf Ivanovich. You can also be asked about the style of this novel, like, the dual layered composition of this novel, like the core narrative and the frame narrative. Core narrative, though it is called core narrative, it's a very short description. That is only at the beginning. And the frame narrative goes with the description by Astafi Ivanovich from his life experience with a stranger, a man called Emilian Ilyich. And also, you may also get the value of suffering as depicted in this novella, because we know how Emilian suffers, how he is tormented by the feeling of guilt, and how he really wanted to pay for the sin that he committed, all those things. And also about the Christian theme or Christian symbolism as depicted by Dostoevsky in this novella can also be designed as a question in the exam. And that's all we have with regard to this particular novella, An Honest Thief. We will again come back with another session in yet another class. Thank you very much.